Hi, I'm Rowena. Last Christmas, my parents sent me a text. 7 words. We want peace this year. Don't come. They didn't ask. They didn't explain. Just erased me with the kind of politeness that cuts cleaner than any blade. What they didn't know was, I'm a colonel. A title they've never said out loud. A uniform they've asked me not to wear. A life they pretended didn't exist because it didn't fit their version of calm. They threw a party in the house I once saved from foreclosure, hung photos of everyone but me, handed my accomplishments to my sister like wrapped gifts. So I showed up, not in protest, in full uniform, on a military jet. Because what do you do when your family's peace depends on your silence? Would you stay quiet or would you land loud? December 23rd, Savannah still wore its southern charm beneath a gray sky. The porch lights were strung up like always, I imagined. Vera probably had her cranberry candles burning, Callista fussing over table runners and family recipes she didn't even cook herself. But I wasn't there. I was in Colorado, 1,000 miles away, standing in my kitchen barefoot, still in my base fleece. A faint wind brushed against the sliding door glass, and inside, my house was hushed. The kind of hush that presses in from all sides, like snow piling up outside, soundless but heavy. My phone buzzed. I thought, just for a split second, that maybe it was something like, "We miss you this year, honey. Still coming?" But no. 7 words, no greeting, no warmth, just, "We want peace this year. Don't come." I didn't answer. I didn't even blink. I stared at it as the notification faded back into the wallpaper of my lock screen. An old photo of me in uniform, sun behind me, shoulders squared. I remember how proud I was the day I took it. No one from my family commented on it. Not even once. There was no build-up to that message, no earlier call, no tension, just a surgical cut straight through the center of me. I'd led combat operations on 3 continents, but that text, that 7-word sentence from my own mother, cracked something I didn't know was still whole. For 15 years, I'd hosted Christmas in my home. I decorated every room, cooked the entire spread, sometimes even baked into the early morning of the 25th. And each year they'd smile and nod and whisper, "She always goes overboard," as if that was a flaw instead of effort. I'd tell myself it was love, that if I worked hard enough, they'd stop seeing me as intense. That word again. The one they wrapped every insult inside. I walked down the hall into the guest room closet and pulled down a plastic storage tub. There, on top of last year's decorations, was a sealed box. A package I had carefully wrapped and sent last Christmas, to them. It had been returned, unopened. A label across it said, "Undeliverable, refused." I didn't cry. I just brought it to the kitchen table and unwrapped it like I was opening someone else's story. Inside was a custom ornament I had made, brass and hand-painted. Langford Legacy, 1980 to 2022. I remember thinking it might finally make them feel something about our history. I turned it in my hands, watching the year catch the light. "Even my love was returned to sender," I whispered. Back in the living room, I sat on the couch. I didn't reach for the remote. I didn't scroll. I let the silence settle over me. This wasn't new. This was just official. The erasure had begun long before that text. I opened the group chat with my family. No messages for months. My name didn't come up. I scrolled through old photos from previous Christmases. In some, I was cropped out. In others, just not there. Not even mentioned in the captions. "Another perfect Langford Christmas," Callista had written once. The picture showed her holding a turkey I had cooked. No credit, no tag. I remember a line from Maya Angelou. "I've learned that people will forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. What they forgot, or maybe never knew, is how they made me feel invisible in a room I built with my bare hands. I opened my email, typed out a message to Vera, just one word, understood. But I deleted it before sending. What would that do? Confirm for them that I was obedient? Instead, I stood up and walked to my bedroom closet. I pulled out a small cedar box and opened it slowly. Inside was my colonel's medal, polished and still. Next to it, a letter from the Department of Defense confirming my promotion, a commendation signed with a seal that still made my breath catch. They'd never asked about it. They never brought it up. I went to the garage and pulled out my garment bag, the one with my full formal dress uniform. I hung it on the hook behind my door. The day was shifting into dusk when the second buzz came. This time, it was Isley, my niece. "Are you coming, Aunt Ro?" I stared at her message. The only light in the room was from the screen. Her words blinked against the dark. I didn't type back. I just let a small smile touch the corner of my mouth. Not bitter, not forced. I walked to the front window and watched snow start to fall. The first flake melted on the glass. "They want peace?" I whispered. "I'll give them a memory they'll never forget." The house wasn't quiet because I was gone. It was quiet because something real was missing. I poured myself a cup of coffee the next morning, letting the warmth anchor me while my mind still hovered in yesterday's frost. Christmas Eve had always meant noise, scraping chairs, half-burnt pies, someone yelling for more whipped cream. This year, all I had was the hum of the fridge and the scuff of my boots on tile. I opened Facebook, not because I wanted to, but because I was tired of wondering. There it was. Early family Christmas, so grateful for peace, tradition, and love. Callista's post, captioned under a perfectly arranged photo of the family gathered in the old house. My house. The lights strung along the fireplace mantel were the same ones I'd bought on clearance 10 years ago. The dining set I refinished by hand after deployment, now occupied by everyone except me. They sat shoulder to shoulder, smiles wide, plates full, and not a single space left at the table. No one tagged me. No one mentioned me. I stared at that image longer than I should have, not out of jealousy, but because of what was missing. Not the lights, not the food, me. The frame was full, but something essential was missing, and they didn't notice. I set the cup down, no longer craving the heat. Part of me wanted to scroll past, convince myself it wasn't intentional. But some things aren't subtle. Some things are messages dressed up as holiday cheer. A notification popped up, a direct message, from Isley. My heart clenched before I even read it. "I wanted to tell you Merry Christmas. I miss you. Mommy says not to mention you, but I snuck this." That tiny text shattered me more than any insult ever could. It was the truth, raw and innocent. When your niece has to sneak a message to you, it's no longer about misunderstanding. It's about erasure. Years ago, Isley and I spent a whole December Saturday baking sugar cookies shaped like snowmen. She was 6. Her apron barely fit. I let her dump way too many sprinkles on top. She called me General Cookie. For one day, I wasn't too intense. I was just hers. I typed, "I miss you too," then deleted it. I didn't want her getting in trouble for being kind. Instead, I closed my laptop and walked to the window. The sky was dull, sun hidden behind low clouds. I didn't feel the chill even as I opened the pane slightly. I needed the bite of winter to remind me I was still here. Back inside, I replayed the family video embedded in Callista's post. I muted the sound and watched like I was studying enemy footage. It's how I've always processed hard things, objectively, then surgically. At one point, the camera swept past the hallway. The photo wall. My framed promotion photo, the one Vera said was too formal to hang in the living room, was gone, replaced with a chalkboard that read, "Home is where love lives." A voice off screen, unmistakably Vera's, floated into the frame. "It's so calm this year. No intensity." I paused the video. They were proud of this version, this edited one. It was cleaner, less complicated, but it wasn't real. Funny thing about being erased, you start to believe maybe you were never real to begin with. I stared at the paused video until it blurred, then walked back to my desk. I opened a folder on my computer labeled Contingency, 25th December. The plan had been in place for weeks. Leave request approved. Base transport coordinated. I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't even decided if I would go. Until now, they wanted peace. I'd give them spectacle. I pulled up my itinerary. Everything was in order. All it needed was a trigger. I was done waiting to be included. I would arrive on my own terms. I clicked into my logistics file, printed out clearance documents, packed them into a plain envelope, then I walked to the hallway mirror. My eyes looked steadier than I expected. Not angry, just finished. I leaned down, grabbed my standard-issue military boots, and sat to lace them up. The leather creaked softly, familiar, purposeful. "You trained me to serve my country," I said aloud, adjusting the tongue of the boot. "But you never trained me to be expendable at home." I stood, walked to the door, and placed my garment bag beside it. It leaned there like it belonged, like it had been waiting. Somewhere behind me, my phone buzzed again. I didn't need to check to know. The woman they pushed out was already halfway in the air. The woman they pushed out was already halfway in the air. That sentence echoed in my mind like a cadence call. Steady, certain, final. But that night, sleep didn't come easy. My thoughts circled around last year, around the moment I made the kind of quiet compromise you convince yourself is maturity. It was Callista who asked. She always asked things with that syrupy tone, the kind that dripped guilt instead of honey. "Hey, Ro, do you mind keeping it low-key this year?" she'd said on the phone. Like, just wear something simple, no uniform stuff. You know how it kind of takes over the room. I'd paused. She waited, then added, "It just overwhelms Mom." So, I said okay. I wore a basic maroon sweater, left my rank, my ribbons, and everything else in the closet. I stood in the back during photos. I helped slice the ham, but stepped out of the frame when Callista held it up for her Instagram story. At the time, I told myself I was choosing peace. That maybe, just maybe, it would earn me a seat in their idea of family again. But watching that same family now, smiling without me, in a house I once owned and saved, made one thing very clear. Even when I shrank myself to fit, I still didn't make the cut. That's how ghosts are made. You let go of pieces of yourself to belong, and then they pretend you were never there. I couldn't sleep, so I got up and turned on the hallway light. There was a storage tub I hadn't touched in a while, tucked under the stairs. It held Christmas decor I never used anymore, sentimental things that no longer belonged anywhere. I pulled out a small box, still in shipping wrap. The label had been scratched up in transit, but I recognized my handwriting beneath the clear tape. I sat at the kitchen table and peeled it open slowly. Inside was the ornament I had ordered from a small military artisan online. Brushed brass, polished to a muted shine, etched with the words, Langford Legacy, 1980 to 2022. Below that, in smaller script, it said, "So we never forget who built this." They'd never even opened it. Not forgotten. Just rejected. It wasn't bitterness rising in me. It was clarity. A heavy, still kind of truth. They didn't forget. They erased. I placed the ornament on the counter. It caught the overhead light just right, the same way sun had reflected off my helmet the day I returned from Iraq. They weren't there then either. I'd told myself they were just bad at showing up. But this wasn't about absence. It was about choice. Back in my home office, I turned on the desk lamp and booted up my base clearance portal. Everything was still valid. My leave approval, signed, logged, untouched. I hadn't said a word to them. I didn't need to. The plan was always for me to decide. Flight options popped up on screen. I ran the routing, made the call. Transport from Peterson to Hunter Army Airfield. Arrival, 1300 hours, Christmas Day. I whispered it like a mission order. Objective, reclaim presence. I took a moment, leaned back in my chair, and let myself feel it. Not anger, not grief, just that deep kind of finality that feels more like standing up than letting go. No more blending in, I said aloud. No more silence. My eyes fell on the bookcase across the room. There was a small photo frame tucked behind a certificate. I walked over and pulled it out. A picture from Kandahar. Me and my squad. Dusty, grinning, in control. I'd led that mission. 2 months after that photo, I got promoted. The photo they took down from the family wall. They told me to keep it simple, I muttered, but simple never got me through a war zone. I opened my wardrobe and pulled out the military coat I'd packed away last year at Callista's request. It was pristine, pressed, and still carried the faint smell of the cedar chest I kept it in. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, I remembered Tony Gaskin saying during a leadership summit years ago. I'd used that quote in a speech to young officers, but somehow I'd never applied it to my own blood. I folded the coat carefully and placed it inside my luggage. Then I walked back to the kitchen and picked up the ornament. It deserved better than to rot in a box again. The zipper made a crisp sound as I closed the suitcase. I glanced in the mirror beside the coat rack. My reflection didn't look angry. It looked ready. This time, I whispered, they'll remember. Outside, a jet thundered overhead. Sharp, fast, impossible to ignore. My silence had been a favor. This time, I was bringing the volume. My silence was a favor. This time, I'm bringing the volume. That morning, I sat at my desk with the window cracked open. The air was dry and sharp, slicing through the quiet of my Colorado home. Steam rose from the black coffee in my mug, untouched. On the second monitor, I replayed the video of the local holiday interview. Again. Vera, in her classic cream wool coat, stood beside a local news anchor under the town's Christmas tree. She was all smiles, hands folded just right. The interviewer asked, "What makes a Langford Christmas so special?" She gave that soft little laugh of hers and said, "You know, for us, it's about keeping it simple. Calm. We've had a lot of intensity in past years, but this season, it's peaceful. We're focusing on family, just the ones who truly feel like home." The anchor nodded, not knowing the violence those words carried. Vera went on, "Rowena's always been intense. She never really adjusted to civilian life. But she means well." I paused the clip. Her frozen smile stared back at me from the screen. I tilted my head, studying it. That wasn't just PR. That was curated memory. That was selective inclusion wrapped in Southern civility. Calm isn't peace. Calm is code for, don't disrupt the story we're telling. I opened my email archive, searching by keyword. Uniform. It didn't take long. From Vera Langford. Date, December 22nd of last year. Subject, just a small request. Ro, I know you're proud, and you should be, but Callista's had a rough year. Please don't wear your uniform to dinner. It draws a lot of attention, and I just want the night to feel balanced. Let's keep it low-key. Just family. Hope you understand. I remembered sitting in my car outside their house, looking down at my neatly pressed service coat and unzipping the garment bag with shaking hands. I changed in the driver's seat, wrinkling the blouse I'd thrown in last minute just in case. Walked in like a civilian, ate dinner like a stranger. They wanted less of me, and I gave it to them. Still wasn't enough. I stood and moved to the hallway where my certificates hung. Bronze frames lined the wall. Army commendation, meritorious service, letters from commanders. None of it was on Vera's wall back in Savannah. The things that built me somehow became the reasons I didn't belong. I printed the email, folded it with care, slid it into a folder marked Christmas 25th Contingency. I placed the folder in my duffel bag. Deliberate. Quiet. At the kitchen counter, I flipped open my notepad, drafted a plan like any field op. Date, December 25th. ETA, 1300 hours. Dress code, full military honor. Point of entry, Hunter Army Airfield. Response strategy, unapologetic. You want calm, Mom? I'm about to land a jet in your garden party. The next hour passed in efficient movement. I checked my uniform. Medals aligned, boots shined. Reconfirmed clearance with the base. Forwarded the schedule to my personal account. I called in a logistics favor to secure seating on a C-130 flight rotating out of Colorado Springs. The kind of favor you don't ask unless you're done pretending. Everything was locked in. I paused to eat a cold sandwich standing at the sink. No appetite, but I needed something in my stomach. I wasn't going into battle, but I knew how to prepare like I was. Later that afternoon, I sat back at my desk, reading the email one more time, just to feel the weight of it. I attached it to a new message and addressed it to my transport liaison on base. Subject, reconfirming transport to Savannah, Deck 25, full dress required. Beneath it, I typed one sentence. For documentation purposes, I've attached prior family requests that shaped this decision. I clicked send. This time, I'm not hiding who I am, and I'm not asking permission. They wanted less of me, but they're about to meet all of me. The phrase settled into my chest like steel. That morning, while eating dry toast over the sink, I got a message from Mrs. Griffin, the Langfords' neighbor who always brought sour cream pie to our potlucks and knew everything that happened on the street before the mailman did. She'd written, "Thought you might want to see this before it hits the neighborhood newsletter." A link followed. I tapped it, already bracing. The video opened with slow drone footage sweeping over the Langford house. My house, technically, once. The one I poured my re-enlistment bonus into years ago to save it from foreclosure. It was all there. The porch swing I built with my own hands, the double-paned windows I paid to have installed. Except now, it was rebranded, Langford Family Christmas Estate. In the clip, Callista walked out onto the front steps in a wool coat too clean to have ever touched dirt. This home, she beamed at the camera, is a tribute to heritage, to roots, to the people who made it what it is today. I laughed, not bitterly, flatly. Except the part where I held the mortgage, I whispered to no one. As the video continued, Vera appeared in her pearls, giving a house tour. This room's always been our heart. It's where we raised the kids, where we taught traditions. Then came the punch. And this, she said proudly, gesturing to the hallway wall, is our wall of legacy. The camera zoomed in. Frames, dozens of them. Walter in his college jersey, Callista's high school debate award, Isley in a ballet recital. But there wasn't a single photo of me, not one, no graduation, no deployment, not even a snapshot from childhood. It was as if I had never existed in that house. It wasn't just exclusion, It was erasure, carefully framed. I stared at the screen long after the video ended, the cursor hovering over the replay button. But I didn't need to watch it again. The message was loud and clear. I was not part of the version of this family they wanted the world to see. I opened my laptop and began typing. To Callista. Subject, your wall. I kept it short. That wall you're so proud of. It's missing the hands that built it. No greeting, no sign-off. I hit send. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. But 20 minutes later, I saw Callista's Facebook update. Some people think contribution buys inclusion. It doesn't. Legacy is about presence. I screenshotted it. Then let me contribute clarity, I muttered. I shut my laptop and stood, stretching the tension out of my shoulders. I walked through my house slowly, one room at a time. Everything here had passed through my hands. Tables I sanded, cabinets I assembled, light fixtures I wired, not because I had to, but because I wanted something that felt mine, even if no one else saw it. 2 homes, one built with tools, one built with silence. Only one didn't collapse. I went into my filing cabinet and pulled out a yellowing document folded neatly inside a plastic sleeve. The deed transfer. 10 years ago, I'd signed over the Langford house to Vera and Walter. They said it was to simplify taxes. I'd agreed because I thought family was worth it. The date stared up at me, December 2nd, 2013, just weeks before Christmas that year. They forgot me in the house I gave them. I slipped the document into my travel folder behind the printed email and itinerary. Later that night, I packed with methodical ease, garment bag, boots, dress coat. At the bottom of the suitcase, I tucked the folded deed, a symbol, not of ownership, but of proof, that I had built something real, even if they'd written me out. As I zipped it shut, my hands didn't shake. The message was clear. I wasn't asking to be remembered. I was coming to remind them the flight was booked, but my destination wasn't just a place, it was a reckoning. After shutting down my laptop and zipping the folder with the deed and printed emails into my travel bag, I found myself standing in the hallway outside my home office, staring at the bookshelf. It wasn't the books that caught me. It was the second shelf from the bottom. That's where I kept the black fireproof box with all the just-in-case papers, divorce records, deployment contracts, and bank wires. I sat on the floor, pulled it open, and began leafing through. There it was, 3 printed wire receipts from 2014. I hadn't looked at them in years, but I knew the numbers by heart. $27,800 in 3 transfers over 6 months. I remember Vera's call like it was yesterday. The taxes snuck up on us, honey. Your dad's retirement's been tight. It's not urgent, but we could lose the house. My house. I didn't blink. I didn't ask them to pay it back. I just wired it. Quietly. I never expected applause, but I didn't expect to be scrubbed from history either. Still holding the receipts, I walked to the kitchen, made tea, and opened my iPad. Just noise in the background, I told myself, until I stumbled onto a podcast link. Savannah Local Voices, Episode 241. Tradition, Resilience, and the Langford Way. I tapped play. Callista's voice came through first, soft and poised. Our family's always managed on its own. It wasn't easy, but we didn't take shortcuts, just worked hard, pulled together. That's what made us stronger. The host chimed in with admiration. That's so rare these days, families relying on each other. No handouts, no outside help. I paused the playback. My throat tightened. No handouts? I stared out the kitchen window, my tea untouched. That money wasn't a handout. It was a lifeline, one they wrapped around their image, then cut me out of. And somehow, that moment hurt worse than Afghanistan. There, I knew who the enemy was. I scrolled through the rest of the episode transcript, half hoping it would improve. It didn't. Later that evening, after I'd changed into sweats and started folding laundry, I checked the town's community website. There was an archived feature article on the Langford General Store, now run mostly by Walter. I clicked through the gallery of photos. There it was, the legacy wall in the back office. The same article from Army Times featuring my unit's response to a bridge collapse in Louisiana, blurred and covered by a fluorescent green grocery ad. Buy one, get one free, all canned goods. They couldn't burn my history, I muttered, so they buried it in coupons. I sat back, phone in hand, and let that image sink in. It wasn't enough for them to omit me, they'd actively covered me. Back at my desk, I powered on the scanner. The receipts, the article, the photos, even the podcast quotes, I archived them all. I dropped them into a new USB drive and labeled the folder Unseen Legacy. If they wanted to revise the past, I'd keep the original draft. I remembered a quote I'd once written on the inside of a field journal. If you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. Zora Neale Hurston. I copied the words onto a Post-it and stuck it on my laptop. The sky outside had darkened. One more sleep before I boarded, one more chance to back out, but I was past that. I retrieved a black envelope from my drawer, slipped the USB drive inside, then pressed a wax stamp from my old unit onto the seal. It hardened with a firm click. I placed the envelope gently into the carry-on, right beside my Colonel medal. No more erased versions of me. No more rewritten family sagas. They pretended I never helped. This time, I'll let the truth speak for itself. I wasn't the hero in their story, so I started writing my own. The morning unfolded quietly. I'd just finished updating my packing list when my phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Abernathy, the neighbor who still brought over fig preserves each summer, even though I hadn't lived next door in a decade. Ran into your mother at the store, she wrote. She said Christmas is so calm this year. No disruptions. Disruptions. The word hit like a steel toe to the chest. I knew exactly what Vera meant. Not loud arguments, not drunken relatives, just me, my presence, my tone, my story. I opened the browser on my laptop, typed in Savannah Community Interviews, and within minutes I found the video. There she was, Vera Langford, hair in a polished bun, standing under a wreath that matched her scarf. It's just been such a peaceful season, she told the reporter with a soft smile. In the past, we've had intensity. This year, it's just us, just calm. Family who feels like home. I paused the video, staring at her eyes. Calm isn't peace. It's the mask they wear to preserve the story. And I was the smudge on their curated image. That afternoon, as I loaded a clean pair of boots into my duffel bag, my voicemail pinged. Rowena, came Walter's voice, low, even. Let's not start anything, all right? No need to make a big entrance. Just don't come stirring stuff up. Not this year. I didn't replay it. I didn't need to. Years ago, I'd used every contact I had to keep Walter's name out of the paper after a zoning violation nearly closed the store. One phone call to a former JAG attorney, one legal statement of clarification, and the complaint disappeared. He never said thank you, never brought it up, just like he wouldn't acknowledge this flight or the favor I was now undoing. I fought for his name while he let them erase mine. Later, while folding my ROTC presentation speech, I noticed how many times I'd revised it. Edits in red pen, notes in margins. I'd trimmed it down for time, but also for comfort. For theirs, not mine. Not all wars are overseas, I'd written in the margins. Some start at the kitchen table. And they do, where respect becomes conditional and success is viewed as arrogance. I stood in my living room and practiced out loud, voice steady. Sometimes silence is a strategy, but silence that's expected becomes a prison. I tucked the speech into my binder and packed my voice recorder. Not because I needed it, but because every word counted now, not just in briefing rooms or operations, but in front of the people who decided calm was better than truth. That evening, I reheated soup I didn't want, ate half of it, then sat back down at my desk and opened an old interview with Walter from the community newsletter. Callista carries the family's values now, he'd said. She brings peace. The words didn't sting. They confirmed everything. Calm wasn't an atmosphere. They used it like a weapon, not to heal, but to silence. And Callista? She hadn't just accepted the role. She'd been groomed for it. The polite one, the manageable one. I closed the browser, then opened my notes again. My fingers hovered over the closing line of my speech. Sometimes the battlefield is shaped like a family, and your greatest victory is reclaiming the right to speak. I shut the notebook, zipped it into my carry-on, and stood at the threshold of the front door, looking back over the room that had seen me pack in silence too many times. The mission wasn't vengeance, it was visibility. The mission wasn't vengeance, it was visibility. Still, I wasn't prepared for the way my hands curled into fists when I watched that live stream. I had only clicked on the link out of habit, another community award show, another press play, and pretend you don't care moment. But there she was, Callista, standing beneath a golden wreath, clutching a plaque that bore the words, Local Legacy Leadership. She wore red, always knowing how to draw eyes. And then it hit me, the footage behind her, projected across the stage screen. It was mine, my home, my events, my community projects. A bake sale I organized for veterans was now labeled Langford Family Tradition. The mural I helped fund and paint after deployment, framed as our family's service legacy. Callista smiled and said, "I've always believed in preserving tradition, just as I was raised to." Raised to. I nearly choked on the words. They gave her my history with a standing ovation. I recorded the entire broadcast. Transferred the file to the same USB where I kept the receipts, the emails, the photos, the deed. The drive was getting heavier, not from weight, but from the truth it carried. From everything they had quietly taken credit for while asking me to keep it quiet. Later that evening, I sat in the middle row of an ROTC regional ceremony held at Savannah's Veterans Center. The program had been printed on thick white stock with gold lettering. I flipped to the final segment, and there it was. Guest speaker, Langford Family Representative, Callista Brantley. I didn't leave. I didn't flinch. I watched her walk on stage, posture poised, voice steady. She spoke about service, about sacrifice, about how some families carry the values forward generation to generation. She spoke like she knew what it meant to write letters home from tents, to sleep with a loaded sidearm, to come home changed and still be told you're the one making things difficult. I sat stone-faced while the crowd applauded. They chose a spokesperson for a journey she's never walked. After the event, I didn't leave immediately. I waited until the ROTC coordinator passed by the hallway. I stepped forward, calm and clear. "Sir," I said, holding out the black envelope, "this might change who you ask next year." He glanced at it, confused. "Excuse me? I'm Colonel Rowena Donahue, active duty. That's my service record, the original house deed, and an email from my mother explaining why they didn't want me visible during holidays. He took the envelope, silent. His eyes scanned the official seal. You weren't on the list. No, I said, but I was on the battlefield. I didn't yell. I didn't demand. I simply let him sit with it. The man nodded slowly. He didn't apologize, but I saw something shift. Later that night, I checked the ROTC website again. The speaker list had been pulled. An update was pending. On the flight back to base, I sat in full dress uniform. I didn't remove my medals for comfort. I didn't untie my boots. I sat upright. My satchel was at my feet. Inside it, the USB, the printed speech, and one photograph, the one they'd taken down from the hallway, the one of me in desert fatigues with 2 bronze stars on my chest. Arrival time, 12:45 p.m., Christmas Day. Objective, reframe reality. As the plane began descent, I looked out the window at Savannah's coastline. My heart was steady. My mind was clear. They gave her the mic. I brought the broadcast. They told me not to come. I came with the flag behind me. Savannah was just as I remembered, humid in a way that clung to your collar and overly decorated this time of year. Wreaths everywhere, red bows hanging from every storefront. But nothing festive lived in my chest. Not today. Our transport landed without fuss. The kind of arrival most people don't notice, but the uniform changes that. I stepped off the ramp onto tarmac with my head high, dress blues sharp, colonel medal secured perfectly on my chest. 2 teenagers at the fence line pointed. "Is that?" one of them whispered. Cameras came out. Visibility doesn't ask permission, it just arrives. A base shuttle dropped me within walking distance of the Langford home. I could hear voices spilling out of the house before I even reached the driveway. Laughter, music, toasts being made. I didn't knock. The front door wasn't locked. It never had been. As I pushed it open, the scent of cinnamon and warm bread hit me. And for a moment, it felt familiar. But then I stepped into the living room, and every head turned. Callista stood at the center, mid-toast, glass raised, guests smiling politely around her. I didn't clear my throat or raise my voice. I just said, "Carry on. I'm just visiting my past." No one moved. Vera froze, wine glass halfway to her lips. Walter blinked slowly, like his mind was buffering. Callista's smile twitched. "Rowena, we weren't expecting." "I know." I walked forward slowly, my boots solid against the floorboards I once polished. I took the remote from the side table and turned off the music. The silence deepened. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone, scrolled to the voicemail, pressed play. Vera's voice filled the room. "She always wants to be a hero. I'm tired of her need for attention." Gasps followed. Someone dropped a fork. Vera's face paled. Walter stepped forward. "That wasn't meant to be heard." "But it was always meant to be felt," I replied. My voice didn't shake. I wasn't yelling. That made it worse, for them. I turned toward the photo wall. This is curated, not remembered. Every frame was clean, staged, and none of them included me. I pulled the flash drive from my satchel and plugged it into the TV. A slideshow began to roll, images most of them had never seen. Me in full gear overseas. The Christmas party I hosted 5 years ago where Isley fell asleep in my lap. Letters I'd sent from deployment. My ROTC cadets hugging me after training. A photo of the mural I helped paint, the one Callista just got awarded for. One by one, the guests turned to look at the family they thought they knew. Murmurs began. Quiet, but sharp. Walter said nothing. Vera sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the screen. Callista opened her mouth, But I cut in. You borrowed my stories, wore my silence like jewelry. But you never expected me to show up and speak. No one stopped me. Then a soft voice cut through it all. You used to tuck me in, right? Isley's voice, timid, unsure, floated from the hallway. I turned. She stood there, taller than I remembered, but with the same cautious eyes. A child trained to observe before speaking, like me. I nodded. Every night. She crossed the room and took my hand. They told their story loud. I brought proof quiet. Some legacies are claimed, others are reclaimed. By the time I woke up, my phone was lit up like a Christmas tree. Notifications stacked one after another. I rubbed my eyes and sat up in the guest bed of a hotel near the base, my uniform still hanging in the corner like a quiet sentinel. The first text I opened read, "Saw you on the news. Proud of you, Colonel Donahue." Another, "Finally, someone said what needed to be said." Local outlets had picked up the story. "Veteran returns, reclaims legacy." That was the headline under a still frame of me in full dress blues, standing in the Langford living room, flanked by silence and truth. I scrolled through names, neighbors, former classmates, cadets I trained, even Ms. Bentley, my high school history teacher. All of them had watched. All of them remembered me now. Back at the house, the energy had shifted. It was subtle, but the silence had a new edge. Less dismissive, more uncertain. Walter hovered around the coffee pot like it held answers. Vera sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't sipped from. "You could have just told us how much it meant to you," Walter said finally, not looking up. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my colonel's medal. I set it down gently on the table. It clinked against the wood. "I didn't need you to clap," I said, voice even. "I needed you to care." Vera looked at the medal like it was a stranger in her house. I thought she might speak. She didn't. In my mind, I replayed the ceremonies, the ones they never attended, the pinning in 2010, the re-enlistment in Kuwait, the moment I stood on stage alone, holding the certificate with shaking hands. No one clapped then, either. I had to clap for myself in private. I walked into the living room, past the guests now awkwardly picking at coffee cake and mimosas. I pulled a small envelope from my satchel and opened it slowly, deliberately. Inside were the documents they'd pretended never existed, the original property deed with my signature, the wire receipts from 2014, the letter from the Department of Defense. I read from the letter. "For exemplary service and contribution to national security, Colonel Rowena Donahue is hereby—" The room quieted. Callista sat with her hands clasped too tightly. "I didn't know it would all come back like this," she said, her voice almost childlike. I looked at her. "It always does. Truth has GPS." Outside, a local news van pulled into the driveway. A young reporter and cameraman climbed out, adjusting their coats against the wind. Someone must have tipped them off. Maybe one of the guests, maybe one of the neighbors, maybe someone finally decided the real story mattered. The reporter stepped forward. "Colonel Donahue, would you like to make a statement?" I adjusted the cuffs of my coat. "I came home for peace," I said calmly. "But sometimes peace requires exposure." From the doorway, Isley stood holding a printed photo, one I hadn't seen in years. It was from the Christmas I hosted after returning from Afghanistan. She was 7. I was in uniform. She sat in my lap with icing on her nose, grinning. We were both smiling in that photo. I nodded to her, gently. I turned and walked toward the hallway, the weight of the medal still in my hand. My gaze caught on the family photo wall. Right in the center, there was now one empty nail. Someone had taken a picture down. I didn't ask which one. If you can't fit in the frame they made, break it. Build a new one. I didn't come back for applause. I came back for air. Morning in the Langford house was quieter now, but not peaceful. The kind of silence that grows after a storm, raw, brittle, waiting to snap again. I moved through the hallway as if I were walking through someone else's memories. They didn't feel like mine anymore. It was Isley who pointed it out, standing beside the old roll-top desk in the den. "There's a drawer Mom never lets me open," she said softly. I waited until she left the room, then sat down. My fingers hesitated only a second before sliding it open. Inside was a bundle of stationery, church pamphlets, a tiny velvet box with earrings I hadn't seen since I was 13, and tucked underneath it all, an envelope with a White House seal. I stared at it for a long moment. It was addressed to me, postmarked 2 years ago. I opened it slowly, as if the paper might scream. Inside was a formal thank you, signed, dated, congratulating me on my promotion to colonel. I'd never received it. I ran my thumb over the signature, letting that hollow settle in. They didn't forget to give it to me. They chose not to. That evening, Vera found me sitting on the back porch. I didn't move when she opened the door, didn't look at her when she sat across from me. She didn't speak right away. Finally, she said, "I didn't think you needed it. You always seemed fine without the fanfare." I didn't raise my voice. "I never needed fanfare, Mom. I needed acknowledgement." She nodded, but her eyes didn't meet mine. There was no apology, only discomfort, sitting beside us like a third presence on the porch. Later that night, Callista stopped me in the hallway, arms crossed, face flushed. "We were protecting you," she said quickly. "You know how people talk when women brag. You were always so visible. We thought it would be easier for you to just stay quiet." I smiled, not with warmth. "Silence isn't protection," I said. "It's erasure in a softer coat." I didn't wait for her reply. I stepped out into the cold with my medal in one pocket, the letter folded in the other, and the photo Isley had reprinted tucked between them. It was enough. More than enough. Everything I needed to rebuild myself fit in my coat pocket now. I stood out back and looked up at the stars. They were still there, steady, distant, unchanging, and somehow they made the breath in my chest feel real again. "I forgive what they couldn't give," I whispered. "But I won't wait for it anymore." The door behind me opened and Isley stepped out, her sweater sleeves pulled over her hands. "Will you come back next year?" she asked. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't the same little girl with cookie dough on her cheek, but she hadn't forgotten who I was. "That depends," I said, "on who they remember me as." The door wasn't closed, but I wasn't standing on the porch anymore. The door wasn't closed, but I wasn't standing on the porch anymore. 2 days later, I walked into the Savannah Community Center with a different kind of guest, a 12-year-old girl named Lonnie, the daughter of a fallen soldier I served beside. Her father, Sergeant Eli Whitmore, was the kind of man who volunteered for the worst jobs and still brought back jokes for the squad. Lonnie had his eyes, his posture, and a grief she carried quietly, like a medal of her own. This was her first Christmas without him. Her mother couldn't make the trip. I offered to bring her. We stepped into the hall together, me in uniform, Lonnie in a deep blue coat that made her look older than she was. The tree lighting ceremony was already starting. A few heads turned. People whispered. But this time, there was no discomfort in it, just understanding. I saw a few of the guests from the Langford party scattered in the crowd. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. Sometimes the family you build says more than the one you come from. After the choir finished, someone handed me a microphone. I hadn't asked to speak, but my hands didn't shake when I took it. "I wasn't born knowing how to lead," I said. "I learned in heat and dirt and failure. And sometimes what hurts most isn't what you go through. It's being erased after you've survived it. I looked at Lonnie. We don't heal by being accepted. We heal by remembering who we are without needing permission. The applause was soft, honest, no standing ovation, just people nodding, some dabbing at their eyes, some holding their breath. That night, the clip aired on the evening news. My words clipped into a 90-second segment that made its way onto Facebook, Instagram, and eventually into the inbox of Vera Langford. I didn't have to wait long. At 8:42 p.m., her message came through. I see it now. I'm sorry we were blind. I read it twice, took a screenshot, saved it under a folder labeled Closure, not Reconciliation. Forgiveness wasn't owed. Recognition was overdue. By New Year's, I was back in Colorado. The mountains were covered in snow, and Lonnie's laughter echoed from the kitchen as she stirred cocoa too aggressively. I'd taken her for a few weeks to give her mother a break. We decorated my tree together. I let her pick where every ornament went. The last box I opened held one final item, the ornament I once sent my parents, the one that never made it to their tree. Brass, worn slightly, still etched with the words, Langford Legacy, 1980 to 2022. I held it for a long moment, then I placed it near the top of my tree. The name Langford never left me. I just stopped needing to prove it. Later, I sat by the window, watching the snow fall like ash from a story that had finally burned out. The weight in my chest had lightened, not because everything was fixed, but because I was no longer waiting for them to do it. They thought they were cutting me out, but I was carving something better. From the kitchen, Lonnie called, "Colonel Rowe, cocoa's ready." I smiled. Not the kind I used to practice in mirrors. This one belonged to me.